All right, so as I was saying, I was in Torah and I'm thinking, it's awfully quiet in the sanctuary right now. So I'm usually like listening for cues. So what do you want to talk about? No, all right. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. I am very glad to be here. It's been a bumpy week, a bumpy summer for me and my family. I'm just very grateful to be here with the community. So I'll begin. So how many of you ever done these quizzes online or on social media? If you tell us your favorite song or movie, I can tell you how old you are. Any of those? Have you at least seen those things? And by the way, the reason they're doing these quizzes online is just to steal all your data and information. They really are. If something is free, you're the product. So what they're doing is they're just sort of lining up your name, your age, and then they can steal all your information. But they try to do this thing, and if you tell us X, Y, and Z, we can tell you how old you are. There's a Jewish version of this. If you tell me your anxiety, I can tell you how old you are. And what are the things that you are worrying about? If you have an extremely high level of anxiety over anti-Semitism and what's happening in Israel, I can probably tell you what generation you're part of or what generation that you're connected to. I don't mean worry, I mean existential fear of what's happening. There's concern. Yeah, concern is, I really hope this is going to happen or not happen. Worry is, I really hope this happens or I hope it doesn't happen. Anxiety is, if you'd like, I can spell that for you. There is anti-Semitism, right? And it is, I want to say it's growing. It's sort of kind of going back to its regular levels. And there are concerns about the future of Israel, but there's concerns about the future of a lot of countries. Does anyone have any concerns about maybe a country that maybe is like, say this one? Or are y'all just good? Like, yeah, no, anyone? Okay, put your hands down. So I think there are things to be concerned about. I think there are things to be worried about, but there is a level of anxiety that I'm seeing, even within myself, that I think that we have to think about and address. I am the child of a survivor. My in-laws were survivors. Ruth and I understood each other's anxieties instantly. Like there were things we didn't have to talk about. Like we just got. Like we didn't have to explain to each other why we had our passports updated all the time, even though we weren't going anywhere voluntarily. It's not like we had some big vacation lined up. Like, so I need my passport. It's like, I'm Jewish, I need a passport. I'm not arguing that's the healthiest way to live, but it's sort of what we have. And if you grew up with any kind of memory of the Holocaust or soon after, or when the state of Israel was either going to survive or not survive, or that was the experience of the people who raised you, you have a much more baked in anxiety when it comes to anti-Semitism and about Israel. And someone who did not grow up with that level of anxiety just doesn't. But what happens is that it becomes a very deep generational divide. The people without the anxiety think that the ones who have it are paranoid, and the ones who have it look at the ones who don't and think that they have their heads in the sand and then they're missing everything. And so instead of trying to understand each other, they just accuse each other of either of wrongheadedness or of not caring or of paranoia. And this actually goes back to our Torah portion, something that Moses is trying to manage. He talks about the people who come out of Egypt who had the direct experience of anti-Semitism, who had the direct experience of slavery. Those are the group of people that he was originally talking to. But the people he's talking to in the Torah portion now are the descendants of the ones who had the experience, who didn't know slavery firsthand, who maybe don't understand why going into the land of Israel or into the promised land was so important. They were in the wilderness and they were fine. The wilderness wasn't the desert, right? It wasn't 110 degrees and vultures. It was a wilderness type area. It becomes desert later on. But at the time, they had food. They had manna every day. Their lives in the wilderness were okay. Right? They were boring. But I was just in Boca this week. It's like being in the wilderness. No disrespect if you're from there. I don't mean it. Yeah, I mean, I do, but I shouldn't have said it. Right? It's just sort of, it's fine. The wilderness was fine. There was no sense of the anxiety of being in Egypt and no urgency to go into the land. They were fine the way they are. And what Moses had to do is help them understand that the anti-Semitism was real and that the going into the land, of having a land of our own, would be of benefit. And he says that if you keep if you keep kol ha-mitzvah, if you keep all of a commandment, you will have strength and you will live a better life and things will go well for you. And that you should not forget what your ancestors went through. And then he tells his story. And I think that there is a power here of how do you teach the next generation about everything that we've gone through in a way that's effective and not something that's going to cause someone to be disengaged. How do you pass down history? Actually, the phrase I was thinking this morning is, how do you tell instead of yell? And very often we just wind up yelling our story at people as opposed to telling them. Moses tells his story. He doesn't say, how could you not know about this? How could you not care? Why don't you understand that without Israel, X, Y, and Z? He tells his story of why it mattered, of why he connects. And that's where it says, you put it on your heart, al levavchem, that it becomes your story too. It becomes part of who you are, that it becomes part of your narrative. It's not a matter of guilt or being told that you're wrong or how could you not know this. Moses says, if you do the mitzvah, or actually in the phrase that intrigued me, kol ha-mitzvah, if you do all of a mitzvah, if you find your thing in the Jewish world, that will connect you to all the other generations. That will help you find the path into the promised land that works for you. If you want people to care about Israel, you got to get them to care about being Jewish. And if you don't act in a way that being Jewish matters to you and brings you some joy, just yelling at young people about not being Zionists is a waste of time. And it's unfair. If you live in a way that says this matters and brings me joy, those connections will occur. And this is why we have the phrases "Uktavtam al mezuzot beitacho avisha aracha," that you write these words on the doorposts of your home. We got obviously the idea of the mezuzah, the words, but like, are you living in such a deep and connected way that it's literally writing your story on the walls of your house? That when someone walks into your house, they know what matters. The house is your child's first classroom, or your nephew or your grandchild's, or it's their first classroom. How many of you did what, I don't know, well, I shouldn't ask, how many of you are old enough to remember corporal punishment? Corporal punishment is, it was okay for your teacher to hit you. And I will tell you, Miss Von Fintel, it wasn't corporal punishment. She was a general. It's not effective. It just brings compliance. It doesn't bring a change of heart. You have to put the words on the heart and not just beat them into the person. So I think what was so powerful, what Moses is asking, is that if we live a life of thankfulness for being who we are, both as a people, but both individually, and to show that being Jewish makes you a better person, not a better Jew. I hate people who say to me, I'm a bad Jew. Like, I honestly don't even know what that means. You might be different observant levels. It's like, what kind of person are you? But I think if you show that if you live with gratitude, if you live with appreciation, if you show that having a state of Israel benefits humanity and not just the Jewish people, and if you tell your story, and if you tell why you're afraid or why you're not afraid, and you live with that sense of purpose, and we listen to each other's stories and why we have different approaches, I think that we find out is that the goals of all the generations are ultimately the same. And that the differences really are just on the surface. And the more we, again, tell instead of yell, the more we embrace the differences as opposed to just saying, oh, this person's paranoid, this person doesn't care. I think that we'll find that the world really is less scary, and that we can live with more joy, and that the next generation can be safe, that the next generation can be free. And I know a lot of you are saying, it's just very Pollyanna-ish, or it's just kind of magical thinking. But it isn't. I refuse to be pessimistic. I refuse to give into the darkness. I went into being a rabbi because I refused to give up on our people, and I refused to give up on the world. And I refuse to say that it can't be better. And I will only live with hope. I will only live with trust that every generation of our people, if we work together, will always rise to the occasion. Shabbat shalom.